All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. It's about 1 o'clock. I noticed there's some people still coming on the call, but I'll do a little introduction and then we'll turn it over to Lonnie to get started. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate all of you taking the time to log on. My name is Patrick Shaber. I'm with Intertech, and we are lucky to have Lonnie Weaver-Johnson with us today of LWJ Solutions. Lonnie is a certified Scrum trainer and a coach and mentor to hundreds of Agile teams across the country, and she also does a fair amount of Scrum and Agile training for us here at Intertech. So very lucky to have her. We'll turn it over to her in just a minute. For those of you that aren't familiar with this Oxygen Blast format, we just use this as a way to engage with our customer base that's increasing both nationally and globally, and we found that these are a good way monthly to offer some new topics. So be sure to check out our website. We don't currently have anything up for November, but we're working on getting that scheduled, so be sure to check back for that. And for those of you not familiar with Intertech, we've been around since 1991. We've grown since then to become the largest software and IT training and consulting firm in the state of Minnesota. And like I said before, our reach has expanded both nationally and globally, which has been fun to watch. But with all that, our focus remains on customer satisfaction, and to that end, we've kind of adopted this model of instructors who consult and consultants who teach, which really allows us to bring the real world into our classrooms and teaching as part of our consulting practice. We maintain some pretty stringent hiring practices that have helped us build a staff of very experienced professionals that get the chance to not only help other organizations grow, but also teach and mentor their staff. So good recipe for our growth, but also for our customers' growth. With that, I think we're going to get started here. I will be on Twitter. There'll be a hashtag OxygenBlast, and our Twitter handle is @IntertechInc. So if anyone wants to communicate out there, I will be out there managing that discussion. There is a Q&A panel. I suggest use that to ask questions rather than the chat. And we will take breaks, hopefully throughout the presentation, and have Lonnie answer some of your questions. And if not, we are recording this session, and I will be sending out the recording here in the next few days. So if anyone has to jump off early, that will be there for them. So with that, Lonnie, I'll turn it over to you, and you can get started.
Awesome. Thank you. So this is called ScrumMaster Beyond the Basics. When we were thinking about, what could we talk about, the idea was a lot of people have gone through ScrumMaster class, but how do we help them do the next level? How do we help people, really grow in their ability to be successful with Scrum? So that's what the idea was behind this. It's not a very long presentation, as you know, just an hour, and there's 4 main slides that we'll look at in just a second. The agenda today, introductions, we'll get to that in just a second. We'll talk about the 4 potential problem areas, and we'll spend most of our time there. And then at the end, I'll just give you a couple of quick tips on some resources that you might find useful, and then just some summary next step kinds of things. So pretty brief today. My name is Lonnie, and some of you I may have taught before. Our paths may have crossed. I hope so. It's always fun to run into people that I know from the past. As Patrick mentioned, I am an Agile coach and trainer. I am a certified Scrum trainer, so I do go around the country a lot and train individuals and organizations on how to use Scrum and how to be a Scrum Master. But I don't limit it to just that. I try to get in and do some leadership level coaching too, because as most of you know, sometimes that can be very, very beneficial. So I've been at it for a long time. Career in IT has been about 25 years, but probably the last 9 years doing Agile. And I won't get into the history of that too much. There's too much to cover for you to be bored with all those details. Okay, so potential problem areas. As I mentioned, there's 4 of them that I wanted to address today. And the first one comes with a team. Really what I was trying to think about for this was how could a Scrum Master take it to the next level in terms of these potential problem areas. How could a Scrum Master be better in their role if there were issues in any of these 4 areas? So one of the biggest comments or questions that comes up a lot is self-organization. What is it? How does it work? And more importantly, how do we make it happen as Scrum Masters? Once in a while I'll hear comments or questions like, will they just wait for me to give them the tasks? Or if I don't tell them what to do, they won't do anything. And so that is a big problem. And what I want to do is talk through some ideas about how you can help a team self-organize. If you don't get your team to a self-organized state, they're never really truly going to be at the highest level of performance, and that's very important. So there are some tricks or some things that you can do to help them. First of all, it's really important for you as a Scrum Master to understand that it's okay to be okay with silence. So when you ask a question or it's time to maybe divide out tasks, if they're looking to you and you always come to the rescue, they're going to expect you to come to the rescue again. So rather than do that, be okay with silence. Maybe you want to look down at the floor, look at your notebook, look away from the team. And if they're just not getting it, then maybe you want to just jump in and say and be a little more direct and say, you know what, I'm not going to tell you. This is something you guys have to figure out. I'll be here if you need me, but it's really up to you guys to choose this answer or whatever. So, but so often we're afraid to be okay with silence. So think about that. Another one is to avoid over-facilitation. That is a tricky thing. Many of you that are in the Scrum Master role probably got that role because you are a good leader. And I can understand how being in that role and turning off some of those great skills that you're probably pretty good at can be a difficult thing for you. So even the best of us, and I'm a communications major, I'm a former Toastmaster president, I mean, I feel like I can definitely facilitate a crowd. But I need to understand not to do that, and I have to turn myself off sometimes. So to give you an example of what to think about, when you're doing your daily, how heavy are your facilitation skills in there? Are you calling on people? Do they not get to give their 3 answers about the 3 questions until they're called upon? If that's one way that you're facilitating, you might be over-facilitating. Maybe you want to think about starting the meeting off with a question more like, who wants to go first? Rather than, okay, Sue, what did you do yesterday? So I know it might seem like a pretty small thing, and it is a minor change and adjustment, but it can go a long way with getting the team to own their own meetings. Something else that comes up is we're afraid to let them fail. And I know that's a hard thing, especially if it's an expensive decision. And of course, you may have to weigh it out if it's $1 million failure versus, losing a day. A couple different things to think about there. But don't be afraid to let them fail. If you can see that they're stewing about something and you come in to save them all the time, they're going to expect you to do that. So take a step back, let them mull things over, let them try things, and they'll learn so much more from that experience. Anybody who's gone through chaos together as a group usually comes out much stronger as a result of that. So I know it's a hard thing to do, but you really have to be okay with letting them fail. Another problem area I hear about is that our team has become complacent. We're good enough. And that can be something that's very tricky to deal with because you don't see it right away. It takes time. Things are moving along pretty good. We're not outstanding, but we're doing pretty well. And that gradual buildup can be sort of deceiving. You don't necessarily see that it's there until something happens when we miss a few milestones, and then all of a sudden we recognize it. And it's hard to blame ourselves or our teammates for things, so instead we blame Scrum. So maybe we're no longer holding a daily stand-up meeting every day, or maybe we're no longer doing retrospectives. So we're cheating ourselves out of the chance to really truly reflect and find a way to get better. And when that happens, things start to fall apart real slowly. It'll be very gradual, but eventually you'll start to hear comments like, well, Scrum doesn't work. And the problem is when you're not doing Scrum, of course it's not going to work. So watch out for teams becoming complacent. That can be something that really gets in the way. Maybe you'd like to try or suggest to them a challenge sprint. You know, if their velocity is pretty steady and they seem to be pretty predictable, maybe it would be time to introduce a challenge sprint. And you can ask the team, you know, do you want to try to increase velocity by, say, 5 points this sprint or a certain percentage? And maybe we understand, you know, if we're all super focused this sprint, all hands on deck, maybe we can get a sprint that's just a little bit of an anomaly in a good way. And so that can be something that motivates and excites the team and may help them recognize that they're becoming complacent and they're not really challenging themselves enough. So those are some good ideas in terms of, you know, things you might see with regards to the team if they are becoming complacent or lacking self-organization. The next section that we're going to talk about is the product owner. And Patrick, do we have any questions so far on the team stuff, or should we keep moving?
You know, I think we keep going.
All right. Sounds good. So the next area that you might see problems is the product owner. And of course, I want to believe that individuals are good people. And I really don't think that people set out to be on a project and intend to be a bad teammate. So I don't think that it's that we have bad people. It's that we have people who maybe don't know what their role is. So some signs for you in the product owner arena that you might have some trouble is maybe we have a lack of involvement. Maybe they have fallen back on their old traditional behavior of it's the business against IT, and so they've become very demanding. In fact, something you'll see if that's going on is where they try to push extra into the sprint, thinking that they're going to get more out of the team. So these are danger signs to be watching for because they can obviously get in the way of a good, solid, trusting relationship, but also it can impact our productivity and morale and so forth. So some things to be thinking about for that is training. Has your product owner been through training? And I'm not talking about a 2-day certified product owner class. Of course, I think that's a fabulous thing, but it doesn't have to be that. Has somebody sat down with them for a few hours and explained to them really truly what this role is all about? If you think about your organization, usually the training for Scrum comes through an IT department, or it's IT who typically decides that the organization is going to start moving to Scrum. When that happens, you'll see that product owners are often left in the dark. They're not receiving the same training, they're not given the same tools, and they're just sort of expected to become these product owners magically without a lot of support. I saw that in my very first coaching gig that I had, and the IT groups were moving really fast and the product people were really digging in. And it really wasn't because they didn't want to be a part of it, although I think part of it was they felt like it was getting shoved down their throat. In reality, what was happening was they weren't being trained. And once they got a little bit of training and coaching and they learned what their role was, it helped them get on board. So rather than blaming the product owner, maybe we can be more supportive in helping them either through training or the next one there, helping them understand their role. Sometimes it's not just product owners that could be causing issues for the product owner, but rather their leadership group. In a Scrum setting, a product owner's day job, typically something like a product manager, doesn't go away. They still have all those responsibilities. And then on top of that, you add this new role called product owner, where they have to work with the team and manage the backlog. Sometimes I get a question about, what do you mean their day job doesn't go away? What is their day job? Well, they're out visiting with clients, trying to understand customer needs. They're working with the marketing groups. They're working with stakeholders. They're doing interviews. They're trying to understand what's going on at trade shows for their line of business. So they're really the experts in what they know on their product. That's why they're chosen to be that product owner for us. And if they don't understand that if leaders don't understand on top of their traditional role, they've now got this thing called product owner, and it typically adds about 40% of a workload to a workload they already have. It can be overwhelming. And so we have to help the product owners and their leaders understand all that's involved now. And that can be kind of tricky. If there isn't training coming to your organization, or if there isn't budget for the product owners to go to class, it may fall on you as the Scrum Master. Part of your mentoring and coaching is for the product owner. So don't be afraid to do that, to educate them, to teach them, and maybe you'll see some better results if you do that. Okay, my favorite one, the managers. So how does a Scrum Master really truly work with the management staff? How do we help them? See, Scrum, the training that started years ago when Scrum was brand new, was just for Scrum Masters. And the idea was that they would come back to the management team and share and coach and mentor not only the team but the management too. And that can be really sticky. I mean, how many of you can freely talk to your manager and maybe coach them and say things like, hey, when you come to the daily stand-up meeting and you talk 12 out of the 15 minutes, we don't get our agenda all the way done. I mean, those are difficult conversations, and that one can be relatively easy compared to some of the other things that you might have to deal with your managers. So this is a potential problem area. You'll know if you are familiar with the 5 Scrum values, there's one in there for the Scrum Master, well, for everybody actually, called courage. And managers need to understand that you will be using some of that newly found or newly granted courage on them by helping them understand Agile a little bit better. So in the spirit of openness, you may want to share with them, hey, I'm supposed to have courage, and as a result of that, it might mean I'm going to sometimes have to have a difficult conversation with you. And, see how open they are to that. Open the door a little bit so they understand why you're bringing these things back to them. Sadly, managers are often in a position where they find themselves sabotaging an implementation for Agile, not because they're bad people, but because they don't understand or they're fearful that their role might be going away. We sometimes hear the term self-managed. Certainly we hear the term self-organized, and that can scare managers a little bit. They don't know really how they fit in. And really, Agile doesn't mean we're going manager-less. Managers still have a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very large amount of responsibility. They're still going to be responsible for all the HR stuff. They're still going to be trying to decide which projects are going to get the green lights. They're still going to be trying to remove impediments for Scrum Masters and teams. There's a lot of very valuable things that managers bring to the table. The one way their role changes, though, is that they are no longer telling people what assignments to take. They'll put their people on the teams, but then as all of you probably know, those teams are self-organized and need to figure out how they're going to get the work done. And for some managers who like to be hands-on, that can be very tricky. So, some ways that you can try to help your manager. Maybe you could suggest training, and they could come to a full 2-day class or look for opportunities like this one where there's smaller learning opportunities available to them. So suggesting training might be a very good thing. If you think that might be hard to pull your manager away for a class, maybe what you'd want to suggest is they look at the manifesto. You may not be familiar with it, but there are 12 principles that also back up the Agile Manifesto. And those 2 things can really help someone understand the heart and soul or the heart and lungs behind Agile. So if you introduce that to your manager, if they haven't seen it, talk it through with them. Help them understand what that manifesto means and what it means to them in this organization. And then beyond that, what are the 12 principles that back it up? After you talk to them about the 12 principles, you may even want to have a conversation with them where you say, what are the top 2 you think we're good at here? Or of these 12 principles, which ones should we value the most? Which ones do you think will be most impactful for us in a positive way? Also, you may want to ask them, of these 12 principles, what do you think the 2 hardest ones are going to be? Opening up dialogue with your manager about the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles of Agile is really going to help create a healthy environment for open conversation. I even recommend that teams put the manifesto up on the wall and distribute the 12 principles to everyone's desk so it becomes a conversation not only between you and the management staff, but also you and the team, and maybe even the team and the managers. That could be a real good, healthy conversation. Something else that can help managers is that getting what we like to call an Agile champion in an organization. An Agile champion is someone who really understands Agile inside and out, and they have enough clout in the organization to help prosper change. So it can't be someone who might be a project manager because they usually don't have enough influence. We're talking somebody more at a VP level who can really push this and channel this through the organization. Not only are they a driver for Agile, but they're the resource that everybody needs to go to when they're stuck. And managers are going to get stuck. They're going to come across difficult questions. They're going to have difficult situations either with you or teams. Maybe even competing departments, would have some issues. And taking those to an Agile champion who really understands the true meaning of what it means for an organization to become Agile, taking that kind of problem to an Agile champion could be very useful for a manager. They also can be useful for a Scrum Master. You could go to this person to try to get some advice on how to work with the managers, or you could let them know some difficulty you're having, and maybe they can use their influence in that manager group as well. Most of the organizations that I've been to that have had an Agile champion on board they've really come further along in their adoption to Agile than others. The ones that I think struggle the most have yet to name that Agile champion, or the person they put in an Agile champion role isn't influential enough to really make change. So think about that. At the end, I'm going to talk to you about a white paper that can be really useful for managers too. In fact, it was written by a CIO regarding his organization's successful transformation. And because it was written by a CIO, it often goes a long way when it comes to the managers. So I'll share that when we get to the end.
Hey, Lonnie.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in with a question. We have a question that says, I have a couple issues over and over. Constantly required to give a full roadmap of what will be in the release 8 months in advance and a commitment on these items. This is almost impossible when we only have stories, which forces us to fall back to some waterfall traits to get more information up front. Any insight there?
Yeah, so that kind of ties into my next one, which is when are we going to be done? But it also ties into the idea that the managers don't really understand Agile very well. If they are looking for a full commitment, a full promise of a date, it's really a bad thing. It means that they don't understand how this is going to work. Now, Agile teams can become more predictable than their waterfall counterparts over time, but committing to a date up front is really meaningless. It is in waterfall too, but for decades we've pretended that it works, and so people are more comfortable giving the date from a waterfall perspective because we've always done it. So I'll talk you through a little bit on how you can do it, but this isn't a perfect fix by any means. What you can do is once your team has become stable in their velocity, which is the number of points we earn in a sprint, you can use that tool to predict how many sprints the work might take, which goes to my question of when are we going to be done? The problem is so many teams are sizing work just one sprint at a time, so we can't see beyond one sprint. On the other hand, it's really a bad idea to plan out exactly what we're doing every single sprint for, say, the next 10 months, which I believe is what the person who asked the question is talking about. The person who asked the question's leader is probably demanding a pretty traditional waterfall type plan for an Agile team. And see, the reason it doesn't work is the product owner or the customer, whatever you want to call them, they have flexibility to add work midway through. And that's one of the biggest benefits, because there's no way we can know everything up front. So the plan gets changed all the time. That's not a bad thing. It means we're going to get the right product and a better quality product in the end when we're responding to our customers' needs and demand on the fly. But the problem is people don't understand that the plan is flexible. And so really how to overcome that, you need to try to share and to teach the management and maybe your finance department how this works. That article I referenced already, the white paper, that would probably come in handy for that too. So that's really the best thing, is to try to educate them on how Agile works and why it's a bad idea to try to predict a date. We can give the date, but we know, just like we did in Waterfall, that it's not going to be 100% accurate. So the first thing is try to educate them. If you can't do that, if they're asking for information up front before you even start, and you know you can't really educate them, they're not listening, or when you don't have access to the right people or whatever, you could suggest we run a pilot program. And maybe you tell them, hey, you know, give us 3 to 5 sprints to figure out what our velocity is. And then we'll have a little bit more information on how to plan this and better feel for when we might be done. So a pilot program might be a nice second option if they'll let you do that. You could also work with the team to kind of look at a best case, worst case scenario. You know, if they've worked a little bit with their velocity, what do we think our velocity is on average going forward? You know, what would our best case velocity be and our worst case velocity be? And then we could predict a range. You know, we could be done anywhere from April to August 1st. Be very careful about picking a date right in the middle. You have to leave that range open. Otherwise, we're falling right back into the waterfall plan and predicting a date, and that gets us into all kinds of trouble. And sadly, I've even seen organizations plan out the whole thing waterfall, give the magical date that the leader's asking for without any regard to whether or not it's accurate, and then they turn around and run the project Agile because they'll probably be better with the project anyway. I don't recommend that, but I've seen it happen many times because there's no other way to get the leaders off their back. And I think it's very sad. I would much rather educate them, but I'm also a realist, and I know sometimes you don't have that luxury. So those are 4 suggestions for the person who asked that question that might be helpful, but it is a tricky one, I know.
Hey, Lonnie, he also had a follow-up question, or his second thing that he runs into quite often is our app has a high UI complexity, not really feasible to have automated tests on all the different things that can happen. So how do you incorporate the need for manual testing inside of a Scrum?
So you might have manual testing with, I'm assuming he's talking about within a sprint, and you may have that, but the thing is you still want to have as much testing up front as you can. Still try not to wait for the testing till day 8, 9, and 10 at the end. And it's going to be hard. It's certainly not as slick as if you have automated testing, so I get that. But always take a look at those roadblocks you see and try to figure out how can we nail one off at a time. So take a look at each one, try to figure out what you can do. In terms of the UI, UI needs to be a flexible part of the team as well. In other words, if a design comes to the team ahead of time, all set in stone, set in concrete, and there's no flexibility on change, you're really taking away the ability of the team to self-organize around their problems and their designs and their solutions. I realize that we typically have experts that know these kinds of things, and they have to help the team understand what the best approach would be, but the team needs to have some flexibility in there too. So that's the best thing that I can see. I've seen it work a couple of times where when the UI person is not flexible at all, it really takes away the freedoms from the team. So watch out for that, because that's a difficult thing. Anything else right now, Patrick?
No, we're all set.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, let's see. So the next one, and I know that Scrum Masters typically get more training than anyone else, but I really want you to understand that you might even be a part of the solution. Are you strong enough in your Scrum Master skills? And I know this might seem really silly, and you might come with a very strong leadership background, but I want you to know that sometimes if we take a look at ourselves, we could find some ways to make changes. So some things that you might be able to do. For example, if your team is not really getting value from a meeting, whether it be the daily scrum or the retrospective meeting, and they are talking with you about eliminating those, instead of caving in, which many of you might be tempted to do because it's the easy thing, instead of that, really find a way to make it a better meeting. Why is it that they're not valuing it? Maybe you could change the format. In fact, in the retrospective meetings, I talk a lot about don't always run the same type of meeting. Go to Starbucks one day. Go to happy hour one day. Find different techniques of retrospectives. You can Google them. You can look in Esther Derby's book, Agile Retrospectives. There's a lot of places to get new ideas. But simply caving in and not offering those meetings anymore is really the wrong approach. And are you strong enough to stick up for the meetings and their purpose and push back on the team? That'd be something to ask yourselves. Another thing is that Scrum is about continuous improvement and always trying to find ways to look for quality improvements. Again, retrospectives are the meeting where we're supposed to be doing that, but if we don't hold them, then we lose out on that opportunity. Are we addressing things like, could we do some paired programming? The question that the previous person had asked about automated testing. I know that it's hard to get to automated testing, but always strive for, well, maybe we could get one of these tests automated. Maybe we could get just something a little better than we have today. So always be striving. Instead of looking at those things as roadblocks and taking them as we can't do it because we're like this, you as a Scrum Master need to help the team understand, yes, it's going to be hard, but how can we do it? So we don't have automated testing. What's the next best thing we can do to make our testing be as Agile friendly as possible? So rather than, for example, waiting for all testing to be done on day 8, 9, and 10, which, by the way, isn't really Scrum, it's waterfall disguised as Scrum, how do we get testing involved on day 2, for example? So other things that you can think about, if you have the courage, maybe you want to survey the team or the managers and or your product owner and ask them, if there's one area improvement that I could bring to the team, would you suggest? I know that might be a difficult question, but think about it. If you're walking around the office after lunch and you have spinach on your tooth, do you want to know that, or are you comfortable walking around for 4 more hours with spinach on your tooth? If I had something I needed to change, I want to find out about it. I want to ask. I want input so I can become stronger and better. So it might be a little bit vulnerable for some of you to put yourself in that position, but wouldn't you rather know if there's an area of improvement for you? And going out and asking that question might be a really helpful thing. So, take some time, reflect on your own skills. Are there things that you can do differently? I think that could be really helpful to you as a Scrum Master. Another thing is the 12 principles of Agile, and I mentioned that when we were talking about the manager section, but that's something too that you could use to kickstart a conversation about your growth areas or even the team's growth areas or your organizations. So take the 12 principles of Agile to a team retrospective, for example. Instead of reflecting on just that last sprint, why don't we reflect on ourselves compared to these 12 principles? How are we doing? What can I do differently? What should each of you guys do differently? Inspiring conversation like that can be super helpful as a Scrum Master. Something else that you could do is have a community of practice for Scrum Masters. Depending upon the size of your organization, some of you might have enough people right there to get together, say, once a month for a lunch and learn in your office, not only for Scrum Masters, but you could even suggest it for product owners too. But getting together all of the Scrum Masters would give you an opportunity to have a conversation, at least monthly, about maybe the the biggest trouble each of you are having, or one thing that you learned this past month that you'd want to share with other people. So it can go a long way to build a community of Scrum Masters where you share and help. Maybe you even want to have visiting Scrum Masters. So for example, maybe when a person is coming new to a team, he or she visits other teams to understand how those planning sessions are working or how their daily meeting works. So I think by sharing and cross-pollinating all the skills not only that you have, but your other Scrum Masters have, I think you can really grow in your skills that way as well. So the other thing is, if you have not ever been able to attend, I know in Minnesota we have an Agile users group that we get together at St. Thomas monthly. If you're not in Minnesota, you've probably got something like that in your community as well. If you could attend something like that, it's often a great way to share and gain information, or any of the Scrum conferences. Those are fabulous for Scrum Masters. You'll be just full to the brim of ideas when you leave an event like that. So great areas for you to figure out, how to get more information into your fingertips. Okay. So I wanted to share with you some of the resources that are available to you. One of them is written by a friend of mine his name is Michael James, and he has an article, and I know you probably can't write down the links, but this presentation is going to be made available to you, so don't feel like you have to write it all down. You can simply look this up later on and click on it. But this first one here is a really great article about Scrum Masters and where their time should be spent. Because we often, as trainers, get the question, is the Scrum Master role a full-time one? And so this article addresses that, and it helps you see things of ways you can work with the product owner. It doesn't just say work with the product owner. It gives you very specific details on how to work better with the product owner, with the managers, with the teams, so you can be looking for improvement areas and identifying those for yourself. In addition, I mentioned this agilemanifesto.org. So if you have never been out to that website, I strongly suggest you go. The manifesto is really the heart and soul of what we're trying to do when we're becoming Scrum or becoming Agile. And it's a very quick, short statement that I really suggest all the teams I work with get it up on the wall. Make it be something that not only your teams understand, but your managers do as well. That way, when we have someone maybe who's withholding information, you can go up there and you can point to transparency, and you can point to the things in the manifesto that are important. Likewise, at that same website, agilemanifesto.org, also there is the 12 principles of Agile, and you can use those to, like I say, get conversation moving. So go to this website, check it out. If you've never been there, or even if you have been there, put it up on your walls and make sure everybody knows it. And then finally, let me tell you a little bit about this last one here, and some of you on the phone may be a little bit familiar with this one already. But I have a friend and mentor. His name is Peter Borsella, and he was a CIO at a company who used Scrum. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story here so you can be familiar with what happened. But they had a company that was really struggling. They had a lot of very dissatisfied customers. And I'm not exactly sure on the size of this company, but I want to say it was somewhere around 500. And this company was struggling, and the CEO of the company was getting a lot of phone calls about, hey, every time you guys deliver product, it's full of errors. Every time you guys deliver product, it's late. And so their customers were very angry. And he knew, the CEO knew they were in serious trouble when he got a phone call that went something along the lines of, we know your competition is 18 months behind you, and when they catch up, we're gone. So he knew that he had to do some changes, and he was searching out for ways that he could reformat his company. What could he do to make it better? And while he was looking, he stumbled onto an article about this new thing called Scrum. What happened was he read the article, and he took it to the CIO and the process improvement person at the company and said, look at this article and tell me if you think we could do anything like what you read. So, of course, the article is all about what Scrum was. So the CIO and the process improvement guy came up with a pilot program. And They came up with a plan and said, you know, here's what we think we could do. And I can't remember exactly what the detail was, but it was, you know, maybe 3 teams in 3 months or something like that. The teams started. They took off. And this is way back when almost every team was doing 1-month sprints. They didn't even get through their first 1-month sprint, and they saw so much progress that they went back to him and said, this is what's happening, this is how much work we're getting done, it's super exciting. And the CEO said, forget the plan of 1 team, or excuse me, I think it was 3 teams in 3 months or whatever it initially was. We're going to go to 18 teams as fast as we can. So they ramped up their plan, they accelerated everything, and they had a ton of success delivering. Now the phone kept ringing, but now the phone was coming to the CEO with comments of things like, hey, what are you guys doing down there? Because we just got a release from you and there weren't any errors. And my favorite one was, hey, can you guys slow down? We can't keep up. So they were having a tremendous amount of success with Scrum. And what happened was, to help them get there, the CEO had gone around to all the various departments in the company and had said, okay, we're moving to this new team-based approach to getting work done. I understand not everybody is going to enjoy this. Not all of you are team workers, and I get it. So if you don't want to do this, you need to self-select out, because everybody who stays needs to be hands on deck. Then he went to the salespeople, and he said, salespeople, you need to stop promising product. Instead, you need to take your wishes from your customer to the technology team and get an idea from them of when we think it's going to be done. And until you've got that information from your IT team, you cannot go back to the customer and promise dates. However, salespeople, because I'm taking away your ability to make promises and sell based on promises, let me tell you what you are going to get. You can tell your customers for the first time ever, they're going to get to change their mind on the requirements. If they give us requirements and they're no longer valid, we'll be able to accommodate their need for a change. And of course, that was a huge win. The next thing he said to them is, tell them that at the end of every month, they'll get an opportunity to see what we've built so far. They're going to have visibility into the product that we're developing, so that if we are off track or there was a misinterpretation or whatever, we'll have the ability to make a change right there. So these were great selling tools, and the sales folks were very excited to start talking about this kind of stuff with their customers. Their customers were on board. In fact, in many cases at this organization, their end customer actually got into the role of the product owner with the team. So in many cases, that product owner from the outside customer was sitting on the phone for the daily stand-up meeting, was attending the demos, all virtual because they weren't in the office, with the team. So it took off, and it was super successful, and actually that story made its way into one of Ken Schwaber, the co-founder of Scrum. It made its way into his book, one of his books. So it was a super successful story. Now, how did they do it? They had top-down support, which is why I really suggest you've got to get your leaders on board with this. Not only did they have top-down support, but it went all around to the various parts of the organization so they could all understand how they were going to be working with Scrum. And then, it was enforced, and that's really a big part of this. So they also secured a coach. They had a coach come on board, and, I'm not here to do a sales pitch. That's just not my style, but it really helped them be successful. So, again, great white paper written by the CIO who went through that. And that, I think it's about 9 pages. It's a great thing to share with leaders at your organization if you are trying to help them understand it a little better. That might be useful. Okay. So we're going to be getting wrapped up here soon, and I want to make sure if you do have a question to go ahead and shoot that over to Patrick. While I'm waiting for questions to come in, I want to share with you.
Hey, Lonnie, we had a question come in. The question is, are there references you would recommend that specifically highlight shared experiences and things to know on how best to adopt the Agile framework within a service team environment?
I just got asked a similar question yesterday about service teams. So the one thing I'm struggling with service team, I'm trying to understand, is that like a support team? So assuming that that might be what the person is talking about, support, I can give you a couple of ideas. Kanban, K-A-N-B-A-N, is becoming a very popular Agile method for support teams. And I can just give you a very high-level overview. Kanban doesn't plan out sprints like Scrum does, but what Kanban does is it says, let's limit the amount of work we're going to commit to at a time. So let's say the team would decide, well, we're not going to take any more than 3 problems or 3 work items in at a time, and we're going to all swarm as a group of people to solve those 3 problems before anything else comes to our plate. And so they can't take on a 4th item until one of those items moves over to the done column, and then they make room for the next item. So that's one way that a lot of support teams are working in an Agile environment using Kanban. A second method, although I haven't tried this one myself, but I think it's a fabulous idea. It was just told to me, probably in the last couple of months. I had somebody suggest the idea of a 1-day sprint. And so what that's all about is you have a very abbreviated planning session in the morning. In fact, you might combine planning with your daily stand-up. And then the team has only 8 hours to plug away at anything that comes and hits their plate. See, the reason why support doesn't work real well in Scrum, when you're almost all support, that is, a little bit can work, but when you're almost all support, you can't plan out your 2-week schedule because the work hasn't hit you yet. It's yet to come in. But you could plan a 1-day sprint very easily based on whatever problems hit you yesterday. And so trying a 1-day sprint cycle is actually a really great idea. Haven't lived through it yet myself, but I'm super excited to come across a team who might try that.
Okay, here's another one for you. I've actually been through this, so I'm very curious to hear what your answer might be. And there's a disclaimer this person puts in. I'm not sure if this question is in scope for today's topic.
Okay.
But he says, Lonnie, what are your insights in how to handle the change impact of 2 companies merging through a buyout? One uses Agile and the other uses Waterfall.
Oh, that is so hard. I've been through that twice. A company I worked for bought a company that was Agile, and actually the bigger company, the purchaser, saw that and wanted to move to Agile. So I was a part of a company that was trying to become Agile after they saw what their smaller part had done. I also was part of an organization once where we were Agile and we were purchased by a waterfall organization. And so it's a very tricky thing. For us, what happened was the leadership didn't buy into Agile, and eventually it went away. Now, I understand it's moving that direction again. It's moving towards Agile. I obviously don't work there anymore. But, you know, I think that the product owner group was the one that was actually really begging for Agile to come back because they were missing out on some of the things they had, visibility into the work, the ability to make changes, the flexibility, that kind of stuff was lost. So it was actually, I believe, the product group who was responsible for, you know, trying to get it back, and I know they're going through that right now. But that is a very tricky thing. If their companies are about equal in size, of course, it's going to depend on which leadership group has the most influence. And hopefully, the organization that was doing Agile or had some Agile practices going, you know, has seen some success and they can prove it and show it, and maybe everyone would get on board. If not, then you as an employee may have to make some tough decisions. Do I want to work here because I really like it, or do I want to work in an environment that I know is going to be Agile? Now, mind you, a lot of companies struggle with Agile, so don't make this decision lightly. You know, really take some time to think about it. But that's something you'll have to decide. And I've had people in my classes who go through it and say, you know, my company is never going to get here. I think I want to look for a new job. You know, so that is reality for some people. They would prefer to work in an Agile environment, but that's not for everybody.
One of the questions just popped in asking, what is your favorite book on Scrum?
Oh my gosh. I haven't read what I think is going to be my favorite book, and I can't even tell you the name of it, but it's sitting up on my nightstand, and I need to start digging in. So let me tell you the author. His name is Ken Rubin, R-U-B-I-N. And here's why I think it's going to be my favorite book. He was just a keynote speaker at the last Scrum conference, and he was very entertaining. He really knows his stuff. He's a certified Scrum trainer who's actually out there practicing. Some of the books, I think, are written by people who are just a little bit too far removed. They're too executive-like, and this is a guy who's totally hands-on, and I just really enjoyed his talk. So I think that he would have some great stuff in that book. So, and I wish I could remember the name, but Ken Rubin, R-U-B-I-N, you can find it.
If you find the name of the book and you send it over to me, I can include it in the email that goes out too.
Oh, sure, that's great. Okay, I'm making a note to myself to do that.
And for folks on the call, like I said, I'll put together the slide deck and the video, and we'll get that information out to anyone that registered for the event. So. Okay. That's all the questions I have right now.
Great. Okay. So for some of you who've been around Scrum for a while, you might be interested in claiming your Scrum education units, or SEUs we call them. So I just wanted to share with people how to do that. And I guess maybe if you don't know what that is, I'll share real quick what that's all about. When people either are trying to become a certified Scrum practitioner, or once they are, I believe it's certified Scrum professional now. CSP is what I'm talking about. Those are folks that have a higher level of certification than a Scrum Master certification or a product owner certification. They've either done a very extensive test or application process to get that designation. And they care about Scrum education units because it helps them maintain that certification. Or if you're trying to get to there, Scrum education units are something that you'll want to know about. And so the hour today will qualify for that. You would record it under Category B. And all you need to do is mention who the name of the instructor was. So that's me, Lonnie Weaver-Johnson, and the URL to the webinar today. That's all you have to put down for that, and that'll suffice to meet that requirement. Okay. The other thing I wanted to say is...
Hey, Lonnie.
Yeah.
A couple people posted on the Q&A. The book from Ken Rubin is Essential Scrum, a Practical Guide on the Most Popular Agile Process.
Oh, now there's
found on Amazon.
Self-organization right there. Thank you, you guys.
And
then should we say it once more?
Oh, sure. Book from Ken Rubin, Essential Scrum, a Practical Guide to the Most Popular Agile Process, found on Amazon.
Perfect. Were you going to say one other thing, Patrick?
Yeah, I was just going to say I just put up the link, the URL for this per Lonnie's last recommendation on categorizing the training.
Okay, so wonderful. And then lastly, for those of you in Minnesota, or for anybody who wants to travel to Minnesota in December, there is another Scrum Master class coming up at Intertech. I'll be teaching that one. And although some of you who might be from out of state might be a little bit scared about traveling to Minnesota in the winter, let me tell you, it's tax-free shopping, and you're right by the Mall of America.
December's not too bad either.
That's right. So, yeah, tax-free on clothes and shoes. So come and come to class and, you know, get a little shopping in too. So I did put the website information on there if you want to register. Again, I know you aren't going to write that whole thing down, but you'll have access to it later on, so you can get to it from that. So, so were there any other questions that anybody had?
Yeah, one more just popped in. What are the rules around visitors who come to the stand-ups?
Ah, that's a great question. I love when visitors come to the stand-ups because, to me, that's how we share and we learn from each other. So I strongly encourage that, but we just have to set rules in the organization of here's what happens when a visitor comes in. They probably don't sit at the table if it's in a meeting room, or if the meeting is around a chart on the wall or something and the team is standing in a horseshoe shape, they have, should take a step back. So they aren't a part of the same circle as the team is. and they should remove themselves, whether they are a team member from another team coming to observe or somebody in training coming to observe, or for that matter, a manager. Because they're not involved in the meeting, they should be on the outer side of the meeting. And they need to understand the rules. The rules must be set in that they don't talk, they don't ask questions, they're just there to observe. And if the Scrum Master sees that the team's behavior is changing, that would be something to address, to, keep doing what you're doing even though a visitor might come through. I would love to see it where every team is just used to the open door and people come and go because everybody's learning from each other, but some of you are probably not there yet.
That's all we got here for questions.
Okay, awesome. I can hang on just a little bit if there's anything else that pops up, or we can wrap it up. What do you think is better?
Looks like things are kind of drying up as far as questions go. People can always email us or send in a request to our website, and I can pass it on to Lonnie if you have questions too. So.
Perfect. Well, you guys, I really appreciate your participating today, coming, and the questions are awesome. It keeps things lively. So thank you. Look forward to doing this again.
Excellent, Lonnie. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
Good day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.